Usually when we talk about the creation of the universe, there's this underlying expectation of a massive, undeniably physical event.
Right, like a huge explosion.
Yeah, exactly. You picture something like the Big Bang, a colossal explosion of matter and energy, a blinding flash of light.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just point to that imaginary spot in the void and say, there, that is where everything started. First there was nothing, and then boom, there was something.
Well, it is deeply comforting to think of creation as an event with a clear start date. I
Yeah.
mean, we rely on that sequential logic.
Yeah, totally.
We want a neat, orderly timeline where matter crashes into matter and cause consistently leads to effect.
But then you step into the source material we are looking at today, which draws heavily from Eastern mysticism and the philosophy of non-dualism,
Oh, yeah.
and suddenly that entire sequential physical timeline just shatters.
It completely defies our everyday logic. It really does.
Wait, before we lose anyone in the philosophical weeds here, what exactly do we mean by non-dualism? Like, are we simply saying that everything in the universe is made of the exact same stuff? Because that sounds like a massive conceptual leap.
That is the core of it, yeah. Non-dualism is the idea that reality is not composed of a multitude of separate things.
Okay.
You, me, the chair you're sitting on, the distant stars, none of those are truly separate. Instead, there is only one infinite, undivided reality or consciousness.
Wow.
Everything we perceive as, separate is just a temporary appearance of that single reality. There are no two things, hence non-dual.
That completely flips the script on how we experience our day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
And that is exactly our mission for you on today's Deep Dive.
Yes.
We're exploring a profound, reality-bending perspective on consciousness, the origins of the universe, and ultimately, the very root of human suffering.
It's a huge topic.
It is. And our source for this journey is a fascinating transcript from a talk given by the spiritual teacher H.W.L. Punja.
Affectionately known to his students as Papaji.
Right, Papaji. And the talk is titled, How the Universe Comes Out of Emptiness.
It is a beautifully complex text, and right from the very beginning, Papaji sets a very specific tone for this exploration.
He does.
Before he even attempts to tackle the mind-bending mechanics of how a universe filled with billions of years of history emerges from absolute emptiness.
Which is a lot to tackle.
He begins with a universal chant for peace. He simply says, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let there be peace and love among all beings of the universe.
You genuinely need that grounding, honestly, because what we are about to do is unpack some deeply mystical concepts.
Exactly.
Like how something literally comes from nothing, and why we, as human beings, feel so much stress, anxiety, and fear in our lives. The goal today is to translate these vast ancient ideas into massive, practical, aha moments for your everyday life. Okay, let's unpack this. Papaji starts by taking our standard definition of emptiness and basically turning it inside out.
Right, because we usually think of emptiness as a lack of form.
Yeah, if a box is empty, there is nothing in it. But he argues that emptiness and form, like planets, cities, and people, not only coexist, but that emptiness actually gives birth to form.
What's fascinating here is how Papaji destroys our standard idea of separation by redefining what that emptiness actually is.
Right.
He's equating emptiness directly with consciousness itself. It isn't a dark, empty void. It is raw, unmanifested material.
Okay, so how does he explain that?
Well, he uses the analogy of a gold necklace to illustrate this. A jeweler takes a lump of gold and carves it into a beautiful, intricate necklace. No matter how complex that shape becomes, the gold never loses its goldenness. The gold is not made out of the necklace. The necklace is a temporary expression of the gold.
Thinking about the gold, it reminds me of playing with a block of modeling clay when you're a kid.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
You could take that gray lump of clay and mold it into a dinosaur. Then you get bored, smash it down, and mold it into a sports car. The shape is completely different. The function is completely different. But you never fundamentally change the clayness of the material.
Yeah.
The dinosaur and the car are just temporary forms.
Yes.
So if emptiness is the gold or the clay and the entire universe is the necklace, does that mean emptiness isn't a void, but actually pure potential?
That is the crucial shift. Yes. Emptiness is pure potential. Consciousness can take any shape, and whatever it thinks, it becomes.
Wow.
And to push that logic even further, Papaji brings up the ocean. An ocean naturally and effortlessly creates waves.
Right.
Those waves crash, they rise, they fall, but those waves don't empty the ocean out, and when they disappear back into the water, they don't add anything to the ocean either.
They're just water moving around.
Exactly. The ocean remains completely undisturbed by the infinite variety of waves it produces on its surface.
So consciousness isn't troubled or diminished by creating the universe. It just remains consciousness. Multiplicity, meaning all the billions of different things we see around us, and unity are actually the same thing. The gold never stops being gold just because it looks like a necklace.
And that includes the inherent capability for creation, too. Papaji mentions that if you look at an uncarved rock, that rock already possesses the inherent capability to hold an image long before the sculptor ever touches it with a chisel.
That's wild to think about.
The potential for the statue exists simultaneously with the raw stone. Form and emptiness are totally unified.
But if the universe is just a shape-shifting out of this pure consciousness, it brings up a genuinely wild complication regarding how we experience reality.
Oh, definitely.
Specifically, it messes with our entire concept of time and space. Because if consciousness is simply shaping itself out of pure potential, how do we explain the billions of years of cosmic history?
Papaji's teachings aggressively challenge our everyday perceptions of time. I mean, we all walk around believing the universe is billions of years old.
Because that's what science tells us.
Right. We structure our lives around a past, a present, and a future. In the text, he brings up kalpas and yugas.
What are those?
In Hindu cosmology, these are unimaginably vast ages, spanning millions of years, that come, stay, and eventually dissolve.
Right.
But here's the radical, almost disorienting claim he makes. He says the creation, preservation, and destruction of this entire universe happen in a millionth of a second.
Wait, if the universe feels ancient, how can Papaji say it's created in a millionth of a second?
It sounds totally contradictory, I know.
On behalf of anyone listening right now who is looking at the physical world, that sounds impossible. If the universe feels ancient, if we can literally dig up dinosaur fossils, rely on carbon dating, and look up at light from distant stars that took millions of years to reach our eyes, how does the math of that work?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the analogy he uses to explain instantaneous creation. He asks you to think about the experience of dreaming.
Okay, dreaming.
Imagine you are traveling in India and you go to sleep in a hotel room in the city of Lucknow.
Got it.
In the wink of a nap, you start dreaming, and suddenly you find yourself standing in Washington, D.C.
So you are halfway across the world in an instant.
In that dream, you haven't physically traveled. Your sleeping mind has instantaneously generated buildings, pedestrians, cars, and even the vast ocean you supposedly crossed to get there.
Right, it's just instantly there.
Where did all of that infrastructure come from? It didn't take your mind billions of years to build the Washington in your dream. It was generated in a millionth of a second by your consciousness.
Oh, wow.
And crucially, it was generated complete with a backstory, a sense of physical distance, and a feeling of time passing.
It's like putting on a modern VR headset.
Yes.
The second you pull those goggles over your eyes,
Yeah.
you're standing in a fully rendered medieval castle. The world is instantly there.
Exactly.
The castle walls look weathered, the torches are burning. There's a whole history implied in the bricks. But you never left your living room, and the computer generated that entire ancient world in the millisecond you booted up the software.
That's a great way to put it.
The backstory and the illusion of time are baked into the code from the very first frame.
That is a perfect modern equivalent. Papaji argues that the waking universe operates through the exact same mechanism. It is a spontaneous, instantaneous projection of consciousness.
Yeah.
It generates the fossils, the starlight, and the memories of yesterday all in this current fraction of a second. And just like your mind doesn't literally turn into bricks when you dream of a building, consciousness never loses its own pure nature while projecting the universe.
It projects the history along with the present moment. The sheer computing power of that is mind-boggling.
It really is.
But this leads to a really obvious friction. I mean, it is a beautiful sentiment to call the universe a spontaneous, instantaneous dream of consciousness. It sounds peaceful. But what happens when that dream turns into a nightmare?
Right, the suffering part.
Yeah, if this consciousness is perfect, whole, and undisturbed, why did it create a universe just to give us so much trouble, disease, and pain? Why bake suffering into the simulation?
Papaji addresses this universal human dilemma directly. He deconstructs the origin of our fear, and his argument is that the universe was absolutely not created to trouble us.
It wasn't.
No. God or consciousness did not invent friction to punish you. The trouble doesn't come from the creation itself. The trouble comes entirely from our ignorance of what the creation actually is.
I understand the premise, but what is the actual mechanism there? Like, how does our ignorance manufacture pain?
He illustrates this with two classic, powerful analogies. Imagine you are walking alone in a dense, dark forest.
Okay.
Up ahead, you see a shadowy figure. Because it is dark and you are vulnerable, your mind instantly concludes it is a dacoit, a bandit, or robber waiting to attack and kill you. Absolute panic sets in.
Yeah, I'd be terrified.
Or consider his second analogy. You're walking down a path at dusk and you see a coiled shape on the ground. You instantly perceive it as a deadly, venomous snake.
Another terrifying situation.
Yeah. Right. In both scenarios, you experience a massive, overwhelming wave of fear. But upon what Papaji calls close reasoning and investigation say, shining a flashlight on the path, you realize the terrifying robber was merely a tree stump and the deadly snake was just a discarded piece of rope.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Oh.
I hear the analogy, and I understand the logic. But if I am the person in that dark forest and my brain perceives a robber, the physical panic is not an illusion.
No, it's very real in your body.
My racing heart, the sheer terror, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, that is a biological reality in that moment. The suffering is physically happening to me. So how exactly does Papaji suggest we actually turn the lights on so we stop running from ropes and tree stumps? Because knowing a philosophical concept doesn't automatically stop a panic attack.
You are touching on the vital difference between intellectual understanding and actual realization. Papaji's solution of close investigation requires looking at the actual mechanics of your own mind.
Okay, how so?
When you see the rope and think it's a snake, your brain immediately projects a future that hasn't happened yet. A future where you get bitten, where you are in pain, where you die. The fear is fueled by a mental simulation of tomorrow. Papaji is telling you to trace that fear backward.
To look at the projector instead of the movie.
Precisely. When you investigate where that fear lives, you realize it relies entirely on the concept of duality.
Duality again.
Yes, duality is the belief that there is an isolated you over here and a separate threatening universe over there. It is the darkness that makes the rope look like a snake. But he points back to the earlier premise. Everything is the same gold.
Right.
The tree stump, the forest, and your own mind are all made of the exact same consciousness. By forcing your brain to recognize that it is generating both the threat and the future where the threat hurts you, the physiological panic loses its fuel. The light you shine on the situation is just the awareness of your own mental processing. When you realize there is no separation, the threat evaporates.
Because there is nothing fundamentally separate from you that can attack you.
Exactly.
But if our suffering is just a hallucination in the dark, an error in our mental processing, it begs a really uncomfortable question.
Which is?
When I feel stressed or sad or afraid, someone is feeling that stress. So who exactly is the I that is hallucinating?
That is where Papaji applies a brilliant forensic breakdown to the human entity. He asks a very blunt, practical question. Who is in trouble? If there is suffering, there must be a sufferer. Let's find them.
He plays detective and systematically eliminates all the suspects.
He really does.
First, he looks at the physical body. He breaks it down into its components. Flesh, bone, blood, marrow, skin, hands, legs. He points out that the body is totally inert. A piece of bone cannot feel existential dread.
No, it can't.
More importantly, when you are in a state of deep, dreamless sleep, your physical body does not complain that it is in trouble. It just rests. So the body itself isn't the sufferer.
He then moves to the mind. We naturally assume the mind is the one suffering. But Papaji argues the mind is also inert. Because again, in deep sleep, the mind vanishes.
Right. You're not worrying about your taxes when you're deeply asleep.
Exactly. It becomes what he calls no mind. All your anxieties, your grudges, your deadlines, they completely disappear when you are in deep sleep. The intellect shuts down.
Yeah.
Therefore, by process of elimination, if the physical body cannot suffer and the mind disappears every night, then suffering does not have a permanent reality. It is purely an act of imagination. We invent these declarative statements, I am bound or I suffer.
That is such a sharp, almost confrontational observation on human stubbornness.
It really is.
We are incredibly attached to our misery. He points out that if someone walks into a room and says, I suffer, or I am so confused, people are eager to jump in and validate them.
Yeah.
We love to commiserate. Yes, life is hard. We all suffer.
Oh, we love to validate the pain.
But, he notes, if you tell someone from the beginning You are completely free. You are pure consciousness. They will put up a massive fight. They will argue tooth and nail to defend their right to be miserable.
This raises an important question about why we are so deeply conditioned to defend our suffering rather than investigate it.
Yeah, why do we do that?
Papaji offers a sharp critique of how institutions, particularly religious frameworks, have capitalized on this imaginary suffering. He argues that many religions validate and institutionalize this pain, essentially telling people, yes, you are a sinner, you are inherently flawed, and you are meant to suffer.
They validate the hallucination of the snake.
They do, and then, he argues, they invent the ultimate expression of that hallucination, the concept of hell.
Why?
Terrifying place for sinners to go and suffer even more after they die. But Papaji asks such a wonderfully pointed, disruptive question. Who has seen the hell, first of all?
Good point.
His argument is that these concepts are just ghosts of the mind. They are mechanisms designed to keep you afraid of the tree stump.
So let's bring this all together. If we aren't the physical body, and we aren't the temporary mind, and all of our suffering, whether it is daily anxiety about paying the bills or deep existential dread, is essentially an imaginary snake in the dark, what is the ultimate takeaway?
Right.
How do you, the listener, apply this to your life today to snap out of the hallucination?
Papaji says the ultimate solution is to cut through the illusion by asking one single piercing question. Who am I?
Just, who am I?
That's it. And he is uncompromising on the timeline. This isn't a philosophical exercise you put on a to-do list for next year. He insists this investigation must be done here and now without any postponement.
No delaying it.
Right. He argues that it is solely due to your tendency to postpone your lack of seriousness about your own freedom that you remain troubled.
So what does this all mean? It means this isn't just abstract philosophy to ponder while drinking your morning coffee. It is an urgent, incredibly practical tool for survival. Whenever you feel overwhelmed by your daily life, whenever the pressure feels suffocatingly real, you have to hit pause and ask, who is actually experiencing this?
Exactly.
And what I find so beautiful is how he frames the human experience.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't view life as a burden. He calls this human incarnation a beautiful dress.
It is the most profoundly optimistic conclusion possible. He calls the human experience a godly incarnation. It is a rare, exquisite reward given by nature.
A reward, not a punishment.
Think about the implications of that. If you are pure, infinite consciousness, you have worn and discarded millions of forms before this one. But this specific human dress comes with a unique feature, self-awareness. It gives you the cognitive ability to ask, who am I? It provides the exact tools needed to investigate your own nature and consciously claim your inherent peace and eternity. Life isn't a trap you have to escape from. It is a highly specialized vehicle designed to help you wake up.
It is the universe giving itself the eyes to see its own reflection. That is an incredible paradigm shift.
It really is.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started by understanding how the universe emerges from emptiness without disturbing it, just like a gold necklace never stops being gold, and the ocean is entirely undisturbed by the waves crashing on its surface.
We examined the dizzying reality of time, realizing that an ancient, sprawling universe can be projected by consciousness in a fraction of a second, complete with a baked-in history, much like putting on a VR headset in a dream.
We walked into the dark forest of our own fears, learning that our intense physiological anxieties are often just ropes we mistake for snakes due to our own lack of mental awareness. And finally, we systematically stripped away the inert body and the quiet mind to realize that the sufferer is a ghost, leaving us with the ultimate task of finding our true self here and now.
It fundamentally rewires how you interact with your own thoughts. And as we wrap up today's exploration, I want to leave you with one final, lingering thought to mull over that builds on Papaji's profound teachings.
Okay.
We talked about how this human life is a beautiful dress that consciousness has put on, but if your entire reality, including the pain you feel and the stress you carry, is just consciousness wearing that human dress, what happens when you realize you aren't just the one wearing the outfit, but you are also the tailor who stitched it?
Oh, wow.
If you are the one generating the fabric of your own reality in a millionth of a second, who gets to decide what you wear tomorrow? If your body and mind are completely inert and your suffering is just an ancient habit of the imagination, then the next time you feel a wave of anxiety about your job, your future, or your relationships, ask yourself, who is the you that is actually experiencing this fear? If the robber is just a tree stump, what happens to your life when you finally stop running from it?
Man, what a perfect question to sit with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Stay curious, keep questioning the fabric of your reality, and we will see you next time.